How's it going, people? Simon Slabber here, and this is a special showcase for the RuneScape lore. We are moving on to the Maj'Ara. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of the Maj'Ara and have probably even met quite a few of them within the game. And the Maj'Ara themselves have a very long history, and quite a lot of them play pivotal roles within Gielinor's actual history itself. So, with this first part, we're going to be starting off with everything you could possibly need to know about the Maj'Ara. There's going to be a nice overview showing you of their power, where they came from, and their general history. And after this, we will then start to move into the individual Maj'Ara, as each one played a different role in different parts. So, let's get started. The Maj'Ara then, they're a warlike and very powerful and long-lived, yet mortal race. They originally came from a realm known as Frenesque. They were known for using exceptionally strong magics, and they are one of the most powerful races to have ever walked within Gielinor. Frenesque itself was originally a realm created by the Frenesque creator god, who was actually an elder god. We do not know his name at this time, so until that time, he is now known as the Frenesque creator god. The Maj'Ara themselves have immensely long lifespans, able to live for millennia. In general, their deaths are either the result of very intense wounds, or being chosen as the sacrifice in one of the rituals of rejuvenation. The only other way these Maj'Ara are known to have died is from missing a significant number of rituals without conserving their energy or procuring energy in another way, or shape or form. Each one of these rituals of rejuvenation actually make the Maj'Ara more powerful than they were at the last rejuvenation. This makes them increase in power every single time a ritual is performed. This ritual, in actuality, could potentially allow the Maj'Ara themselves to gain so much power that even they themselves could actually reach godhood. The average size of a Maj'Ara, in case you was curious, is typically 1.5 times as much as a human. They're roughly known to be about the size of 8 to 10 foot, although they are capable of shape-shifting, so this can vary depending on whether or not they choose to do so. The Maj'Ara possess the ability to detect other members of their race around the world, additionally. Although, indeed, certain circumstances can circumvent this massive ability, such as Sliske is known for hiding himself from the rest of the Maj'Ara. Although the Maj'Ara themselves aren't immortal, the Maj'Ara do age incredibly slowly, and in the period of time before the next ritual actually takes place, their flesh decays off their bodies, and they're able to survive as skeletal beings for quite some time. However, they do regain their flesh when the next ritual is then performed, as long as they attend. Provided that they actually continue and attend to these rituals, they're not likely to die of any natural causes. The ritual of rejuvenation, in case you was curious, as I've mentioned it a few times, is actually an event that takes place amongst the Maj'Ara and the Maj'Ara alone. It takes place when the planets themselves are in alignment, and recently it's been known that they've agreed to having this ritual once every 500 years, although in ancient history it has been known that the time difference between each ritual has differed. During these rituals, a sacrifice amongst the Maj'Ara themselves must be decided upon. How they decide this is unclear, although it's believed that it's usually through a battle of some kind. The loser then is the one who is killed in order to rejuvenate the others. The Majara that lost this battle is then sacrificed, and the nearby ritual marker channels the sacrificed Majara's power into the surviving members of the Majara. In addition to this, because of the way it works, every single rejuvenation actually takes the power of the sacrificed Majara and splits it amongst the remaining living Majara, in turn actually making them more powerful after each ritual. This sequence of rituals allows the Majara themselves to be practically immortal, not dying of age and dying out at the same time. One thing worthy of mentioning though, unlike the Dragonkin, who additionally cannot die of age either, the Majara, on the other hand, are actually capable of reproduction. The Dragonkin are not. Proof of this is the fact that Lucian actually has a daughter. With that said, that should give you a pretty good idea on the kind of being a Majara actually is. They are immensely powerful, and they are all capable of incredibly strong magic. They are all capable of shapeshifting, and at any given point they'll actually make a ritual of rejuvenation, at which point they actually sacrifice their own kind in order to gain power and live that little bit longer. But the Majara from the Frenesque plane, and the plane we are on, is Gielinor. How did they come to be here? Well, let's start from the very beginning then, and move up to recent history. So to start off with Frenesque itself, the Majara were originally the inhabitants of a world known in the common tongue as Frenesque, often called the realm of perpetual warfare. Virtually nothing is known of the Majara's history prior to their arrival to Gielinor. Although Frenesque was apparently a plane of endless war and conflict due to their presence, the Majara are known to believe in some type of creator god, although its role in the history is ultimately unclear. It is known, however, that this creator god is in fact an elder god who created the Frenesque plane itself, and possibly even the entirety of the Majara race. The number of Majara living in Frenesque prior to the Majara's departure is unknown, although, counting back, it would have been a number between 30 and 40, we estimate. To be able to rejuvenate themselves, the Majara likely built a new ritual marker in the north, as the original one from Frenesque could not be moved. Virtually all aspects of Majara society is entirely centered on warfare. A handful of folktales and stories, such as that of the Muspah, survive to this day, and suggest that the race may also have been possessed some type of rudimentary culture outside the immediate circle of war. Soon, though, they begin to arrive in Gielinor. Near the beginning of Gielinor's second age, Icthlarin, a Menephiscian god of the dead, brought all of the Majara to Gielinor at the promise of a large battle. Icthlarin at this time needed warriors to ward off the immense forces of Zaros, who were slowly invading the Caridian lands from the north, and their ability to regenerate from death and change appearance greatly appealed to Icthlarin. Queen Sanlidin mentions an oath of obedience, which the Majara were said to have taken before their arrival upon Gielinor, which means Icthlarin may not have enslaved their race, but negotiated their service as mercenaries. What he offered their race in return was the opportunity to fight for the Menephites and defend their land in the Caridian-Zarosian War. Although the Majara apparently never fully succumbed to his rule, and Icthlarin never had the influence he thought, the Majara soon became known as the Stern Judges, or the Faceless Ones. Due to their abilities, According to Queen Senlitten, the Majara fought against Zaros when he first started to invade the desert from the north. Their arrival was fairly grotesque. It is described by a Menethite mercenary from that time, Graham Kobold, as a small army following Ixthlarin through a giant interdimensional rift. For years, the Majara served Ixthlarin and the Menethite pantheon, and eventually actually won the war. However, once the war ended, Ixthlarin took away all of Sliske's wights, which he had created from the Zarosian invaders, to allow them to pass on to the afterlife. This singular act angered the Majara to an immense degree, and it appears he made some sort of deal with Zaros in exchange for the loss of his wights at Ixthlarin's hand. Also around this time, Ixthlarin's sister, Amaskat's mind, started to become warped and corrupted by the Majara's power and presence. Although the details of this are actually immensely vague, she became known as the Devourer, an evil goddess of destruction. Eventually, all other Majara also came into the service of Zaros, a god that saw their value as soldiers and offered them to serve under him rather than attempt to defeat them. Zaros offered the Majara power in his growing empire, and they, tired of being denied war, following Sliske, gladly accepted this offer. The Majara soon became Zaros' greatest soldiers and climbed up to high ranks, as was the case with Zamorak and Azanadra, amongst many others. Whilst under Zaros' rule, Zaros, with many humans, the Majara, vampires, dragon riders, and even demons, and even then other races at his disposal, soon established an unrivaled empire in eastern Gielinor. Nearly all of modern-day Mistalin, Asgarnia, northern Haluland, and the Farinthi region soon came under the God of Control's rule. The Majara, his greatest soldiers, revelled in the bloodshed. The Zarosian kingdom was one of great prosperity. But the Majara were not content. Soon they became divided, and began to work towards their own ends. The most significant case of this is Zamorak. Zamorak was amongst the strongest beings to have ever walked on Gielinor. He earned himself the nickname the Scourge of the Battlefield, ruthlessly proving his power in combat countless times. This, in turn, actually earned him favour with Zaros, who quickly appointed him to the rank of general. Yet, despite this, Zamorak was not willing to serve Zaros, and even as his kingdom expanded from Sentistan, Zamorak still plotted against him. Azanadra became Zaros' champion, and remained ever loyal to him. Soon, though, other Majara, such as Lucian, Inakra, Zamoragul, and Haziel, joined Zamorak in his plotting to overthrow Zaros. However, on the opposite side, Azanadra, Hesiatal, and Sliske remained incredibly loyal to Zaros. By a coincidental and maybe preordained series of events, the Staff of Armadyl, an immensely powerful Elder artifact, eventually fell into the hands of Zamorak. With the assistance of individuals such as his fellow Majara conspirators, Lord Draken, as well as Vigora, and many others, Zamorak managed to devise a way to defeat the Empty Lord. First, he eradicated all potential threats, such as Zaros' other generals, Azanadra, Nex, and Char, to name just a few. Zamorak, Zamoragul, Haziel, Inakra, Draken, Vigora, Thamaron, Morvennon, and Aprobus eventually approached Zaros' citadel and begun their attack. A great battle raged within Zaros' stronghold. Zamorak, backed by the aforementioned Majara and loyal followers, attacked Zaros within his own throne room. While Zamorak was fighting, his allies ensured that none of Zaros' bodyguards could interfere, Eventually, Zamorak somehow managed to impale Zaros with the staff in his back. But the latter fought on, and was on the winning hand. Eventually, Zaros grabbed Zamorak by his throat and proceeded to choke his former general. However, while choking Zamorak, Zaros suddenly started to lose all power due to the stab wound, and started to stumble, at which point the staff then impaled even further into Zaros' body, and in fact proceeding all the way through and actually impaling Zamorak at the same time. And, acting like a lightning rod, the Staff of Armadyl itself actually transferred some of Zaros' power into Zamorak. As soon as Zaros noticed this, he faded from existence and from Gilinor's plane, while Zamorak seemed to become even more of a real threat. Zaros left his body to avoid death, and in turn placed a curse on all those that had aided in the betrayal. The curse immediately struck, but did not seem to affect the Maj-Arrah. Whether or not this is because they are beings of nigh pure magic, or simply the fact that their lifespan is so immensely great that it is yet to see any noticeable change, is still unknown. So, Zaros left Gilinor, and now Zamorak, with power in hand, turns to godhood. Despite the intense hatred between many of the gods, they all agreed that Zamorak must be punished, and so, even though Zamorak stood triumphant over Zaros, the gods decided to actually banish him from Gilinor. However, not long after his banishment, Zamorak then returned. With the aid of the Stone of Jaz, the Staff of Armadyl, as well as Zaros' power, Zamorak had managed to ascend to godhood. Calling upon his former warriors, Zamorak decided to declare war upon all that opposed him. Thus began the mighty Gilinorian God Wars of the Third Age. Throughout these wars, the Maj-Arrah would prove a terrible force within the battlefield. The remaining Zerosians played a tactical move, sending their strongest army, led by the mighty General Nex, to conquer the ritual site for themselves. While this effort was initially a great success, Nex, soon after, was imprisoned by a Saradominist troop, not long after the battle had begun. Individuals such as Sliske decided to go into hiding at this point. However, Azanadra, another champion of Zaros, continued to fight for Zaros and defended the Zerosian stronghold Sentistan, in an attempt to re-establish contact with his god. Eventually, though, Zamorakian troops claimed the city. Azanadra, in turn, was then imprisoned within Jaldrakht by a Zamorakian and Saradominist alliance. The Zamorakian Maj-Arrah continued to wage his war upon the few Zerosians that remained. Most were forced into the Caridian Desert, which, after the preceding wars, had turned it much into a desert at this point. It was here that they decided they would live as bandits, and they still are today. The Zerosian Maj-Arrah were all either imprisoned, forced into hiding, or killed. Towards the end of the God Wars, the Maj-Arrah Palkira gave birth to a son, Khazad, and he was raised to follow Zamorak. Shortly before the end of the Third Age, at the end of these mighty God Wars, Zamorak finally found the Stone of Jaz, which Saradomin had confiscated from him. As a final act of Zerosian extermination, and perhaps out of sheer hatred or fear, he used its power to completely eliminate Pharynthi, or the wilderness. This caused so much damage to the surrounding land and the Anima Mundi, the life force of the planet itself, that Guthix was awoken from his millennia worth of slumber. Seeing the sheer horror that had been unleashed upon Gielinor. He immediately demanded an end to these god wars, and in turn banished all gods that participated from Gielinor as a reminder of his power. Guthix stuck a massive blade into the center of a crater in the ruins of the Zarosian kingdom of Pharynthi, and straight after created the Edicts of Guthix. Still though, even though this has happened, the Majara that sided with Zamorak continued to be loyal to him, as this would help in the future rituals. After the gods had been banished, and Guthix retreated into a cave once more to sleep again, the Majara began to search for him in an attempt to return Zaros or Zamorak. After he was deemed unfindable, however, most Majara gave up in this search, and just simply settled for the events that happened. Haziel, another Majara follower of Zamorak, continued his tutoring of the young Khazad, for example, and Zamorgel retreated to his fort in the north. The results of the betrayal and the God Wars was a large abyss between the Zamorakian and Zarosian Majara factions. The two camps would become incredibly separated, with only certain individuals such as Karshai and Jalan, although the latter seems to still remain loyal towards Zaros, actually wish to exist within peace. By the end of these God Wars, only a handful of Majara still survive, and only a few of those were attending the rituals. And by the end of the Fourth Age, the number of Majara missing the rituals reached its peak, seeing that Anakra, Akthanakos, and Bilrak would become otherwise occupied. Azanadra, Karshai, and Jalan were imprisoned, and Lamistad and Mizarg had already been sacrificed. This meant that at the seventh ritual, only two Zarosians, Wahisiatul and Sliske, were to attend. A Zamorakian Ralvash was sacrificed, nonetheless though. The living Majara continued to serve Zamorak and Zaros, though they become very divided within their actions. Only at the 18th ritual did Anakra, Akthanakos, and Azanadra resurface. Today, the Majara are working towards different goals, and a few can still be found in the far reaches of Gielinor. While the Zamorakian Majara still continue to increase their power and expand their conquered territory, the few faithful to Zaros remain in hiding and secretly prepare for his return. After the 18th ritual, most of the living Majara participated in the assassination of Guthix. This marked a defeat for the Zamorakians when Guthix was slain by Sliske. This cleared the path for Zamorak, as well as the mighty Zaros, to return, and both gods are currently plotting. So that covers most of the general history of the Majara. Nice little overview, gives you a good idea of what they're capable of, what they did during the times. At the start, I mentioned briefly on some of their abilities. Now I think it's about time we dove in a little bit deeper to give you a better understanding of what these mighty beings are actually capable of. Well, to start with, the Majara, as you know, can live for an incredibly long amount of time, to the point where they are near immortal. Azanadra, one of the most powerful Majara and an avid follower of Zaros, refers to himself as old. Bearing in mind that all of these Majara arrived within Gielinor roughly 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, we still don't actually know how old the Majara were when they arrived. Additionally to this, because they do live such an incredibly long time, the Majara themselves are, as you would expect, incredibly difficult to actually kill. The only surefire way known to kill a Majara is via sacrifice. However, they can still wither and die given enough time and a lack of rejuvenation, which is one of the main reasons why once every 500 years or so, give or take, one Majora is sacrificed in order for the other Majora to regain power as well as their youth. However, contrary to this, even if you was to somehow prevent the Majora from performing this ritual of rejuvenation, they are very much still capable of rejuvenating themselves without having to sacrifice one of their own. Sheer proof of this is the fact that the daughter of Lucian, Moya, as well as one of the original Majora, Bilrak, managed to keep themselves powered up, as well as rejuvenated and even improving in power, simply by draining on energy from some kind of form of portal. Well, the sheer essence of power for these mighty beings, seeming as they are pretty much nigh unkillable, they are generally associated with sheer magic power. In this aspect, the Majora are second to none. They can use magic without the assistance or any kind of need for runes whatsoever. However, humans and elves, for example, basically have to have runes in order to use any type, shape or form of magic. Additionally to this though, not all Majora use magic as a primary offensive. But with the right training, they are near unstoppable. For instance, some such as Anakra, they can actually cast spells that prevent the victim from aging. Now you might think, why would they do this? Well, it comes at the cost of making them nearly entirely immobile. Well, practical uses of this that have been known to have happened via the Majora is torture. And the reason for this is they starve their victims for hundreds to thousands of years. It's also been stated that they can prevent wounds from healing, inflicting pain with their minds, the ability to raise the dead, and place themselves in a sleep that in time can heal even the most severe of wounds. Some are even known to be capable of darkening the skies with living blood and clouds that take on dangerous forms and block the sky. One such Majora that is in particularly skilled with this is Zamoragul. They're known to possess the ability to hide godly energy from detection and traverse the realms of dreams. Others, such as Lucian and Zamoragul, dabbled a little bit with the art of necromancy, and with this they're able to summon large armies of undead warriors and trolls to aid them within battle. Additionally to this, the Majora themselves are the original users of ancient magics. The Guardians of Armadyl also claimed that the Majora were at one point so many and so powerful, they once dominated this plane of existence. This is an obvious reference to the sheer domination they obtained through the God Wars of the Third Age. What makes them really feared, though, is the fact that the Majora are able to heal their wounds within battle, nullifying even major damage inflicted within a short time. Additionally to this, it seems that some Majora even have a kind of trademark spell, aside from magic. Examples of this is Khazad, for example. He's incredibly proficient in melee combat, which is completely the opposite to what you'd actually expect. Another trademark ability / spell is Slisgaze, who is actually capable of controlling the Shadow Realm. Another strange and rather frankly disturbing ability the Majora obtain is they actually possess some type of innate race awareness, and under most circumstances are capable of feeling or knowing there's a presence of other Majara within their world. In this way, the Majara can quite accurately determine whether or not members of the race are alive, weakened, or even dead. However, this awareness isn't 100% foolproof, and there are some exceptions to this, and kind of proof otherwise. Karshai and Jalan are two Majara known to have achieved this in the past. Although Jalan's disappearance was actually unintentional, Karshai's, however, was fully intentional and successfully evaded the Majara's ability to feel this presence. And, strangely enough, the way he achieved this was by wiping his own memory. Karshai entirely forgot he was a Majara, and how to even use his own power. This had two noticeable effects. The first prevented other Majara from detecting his presence in the world, and the second is a heavily reduced regeneration. Without having any knowledge or any use of his power, he was able to miss many rituals and still remain as strong as he once was, completely and utterly avoiding the degradation of life. Additionally, let's move on to a bit of power. Some of the more potent Majara are entirely more powerful than lower tier deities in combat. For example, Haziel, in his newly resurrected and even weakened state, still surpasses the essences of the demigods, the Zacrondis Ap Mechan, the Bandos Avatar, despite the Bandos Avatar containing quite a large chunk of Bandos' power. Now granted, these are pretty much the bottom of the god barrel tier 7 gods, but even in his weakened state, newly resurrected, and he's still more powerful than the lowest tier gods. You could only imagine the power of Majara such as Lucian, Azanadra, and Sliske. Another thing worth mentioning about the Majara is their actual physical bodies themselves. Most Majara, contrary to what you would actually think, are incredibly strong. Many can easily shatter bones with their bare hands and defeat many armed humans. Their essence itself seems to be bound in the 4 ancient elements of the ancient spells themselves. These are smoke, shadow, blood, and ice. The reason why this is hypothesized is because Azanadra as well as Akthanakos have all been captured and sealed, or at least bound their essence, within 4 diamonds, each representing one of those elements. Another strange bit of information you may or may not know is the Majara were actually some of the first wielders of dragon equipment that is actually still in use today. However, one thing to point out is the Majara did not actually create dragon equipment. That actually goes to a sect of dragonkin known as the Necrocertes. The dragonkin is split into 2 groups. One is kind of the rage offense group, whereas the other is more of a scientific focused group. And it was these, the Necrocertes, that actually developed the dragon equipment. However, how the dragon equipment itself came into the hands of the Majara is still unknown, although it was known to have spread during the God Wars in the 4th Age. And the final ability these mighty beings have is shapeshifting. The Majara themselves are capable of shapeshifting into what seems to be anything they actually want, though none of them seem to be capable of impersonating another Majara, strangely enough. They are even capable of shapeshifting by accident, as happened to Jalan when he turned into a Muspah, while he was having a nightmare. This is why they are called the Faceless Ones by Menophites. In addition, they're actually able to make each other shapeshift. Majara are also capable of teleporting themselves and almost anything or anyone with them, to presumably any location within the surface of Gielinor. So, with that said, that is pretty much everything about the Majara you need to know. You've seen their powers, or you know of their powers I should say. You know of their history, why they was included in the ancient times of Gielinor itself, how they came to be in, and how they actually arrived within Gielinor, and their current loyalties. So the only thing left to mention is the known Majara that still exist to this day and have been found within game. The first is Akthanikos, and he's primarily a Zarosian follower of average power. Azanadra is another of Zaros' followers. Bilrak is a Zamorakian Majara, although whether or not he is dead or alive is still unclear, although he is believed to be dead. Inakra is the only known surviving female Majara, surprisingly enough, and she is known to be a follower of Zamorak. Haziel, another, is a follower of Zamorak as well. Jalan is a Zarosian Majara, who unlike his kin did not care for power and simply wished to exist in peace. Khazad is currently the youngest Majara of all, and he is currently a follower of Zamorak. Kashai is a strange one. He's a neutral Majara, and generally tends to be friendly towards humankind, while most other Majara harbour some disdain towards humans or other weaker races/species. Lamestad is another, which is mostly unknown about, although he is believed to be a Zamorakian Majara. Lucian, one of the most prevalent Majaras, is known to be a conspirator with Zamorak. Whether or not he still chooses to follow Zamorak is slightly unclear. Moya is another, and Moya is the daughter of Lucian, and she is an avid follower of Zamorak and can be found at Zamorak's side in the Battle of Lumbridge. Sliske is an immensely powerful, and probably the most powerful Majara at this given time, and he is an avid follower of Zaros. Although with his great power, whether or not he is still linked with Zaros is a different matter, which we'll soon find out. Hyacinthe is another follower of Zaros, and quite a conniving and clever Majara at that. Zamorak, although now a god, is still, species-wise, a Majara. Zamorgul is the other Majara still known to us today and has been found within game, and he is also an avid follower of Zamorak. So now you know the Majara, you know their history, you know their powers. And that is the end of this episode. But in the next coming up episodes, we'll be going into further detail into each of these Majara, and I'll tell you their individual stories, and what they did personally throughout the wars and strife of Gielinor. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all later. Have a good one.